China's foreign ministry spokesperson says it will ban several U.S. lawmakers from entering the country, including Senators Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, Representative Chris Smith, and Ambassador for Religious Freedom Sam Brownback. This comes after their open criticism of the ruling Communist Party's policies toward minority groups and people of faith. China said actions by the U.S. had seriously damaged China-U.S. relations. CBN News international correspondent Dale Hurd joins us now. Dale, what does this Chinese move signal to you?
Well, it's kind of pathetic. It shows how little leverage China has. Look, we sanction Chinese officials because they're committing genocide against the Uyghurs. It's horrible. It includes forced abortions. And so this dictatorship in Beijing is doing what dictatorships do. They hit back. It's pathetic. They can't do a lot because we're one of their biggest markets. We are the goose that lays the golden egg for them. They've been looting us of intellectual property for years. They want the status quo to continue for as long as possible. So they're hitting back as weakly as they can.
Dale, Ted Yoho, the ranking Republican from Florida on the House Foreign Affairs Committee for Asia, he reportedly said, quote, "People will die." What is he talking about?
He's afraid that China is going to ram one of our Navy ships in the South China Sea. China has been claiming most of the South China Sea as its own private lake. It's been outrageous. They've been building islands in it. I'm sure folks are somewhat familiar with this activity. And so every year the U.S. Navy does a freedom of navigation tour through the South China Sea, and we sail right past these installations and right through the water that China claims, and we tell them, look, the international community doesn't recognize this, and we don't recognize this. There is a fear that because whenever we do this, China tries some sort of stunt, that it could go wrong and there could be a collision and someone might die.
How likely is it that some sort of shooting war would take place, and who do you think would have the advantage?
No one wants a shooting war, especially not China. China wants things the way they are so that they, as I said, they can keep looting us of intellectual property and selling us junk. And their military is grossly overrated. So who would, but it could happen accidentally. Who would have the upper hand? It was fashionable to say China would, that this was going to be the Chinese century. But now that as we look at China's activity, they've alienated so many of their neighbors. Their military is not as good as we thought it was, that I think the United States would prevail.
China now has border disputes with a lot of its neighbors like you're talking about, and in one incident killed 20 Indian soldiers. Why has China suddenly become so aggressive?
This has happened under President Xi, who I think has turned out to be a disaster for China. He had his China Dream speech a few years ago, and the idea was China would finally be assertive and take back all the territory that it imagined belonged to it, including territory from Russia and India, and it has at least 8 border disputes with its neighbors. And its only real military ally now is North Korea. Xi has done real damage to China's standing in the world community. Even Europe is turning against China, and that says a lot.
Okay, our international correspondent Dale Hurd, thanks for your insights, Dale.